This is Jessica.
And this is Kelly. And this is the Chasing Brighter
podcast. Hello, welcome to today's podcast. We're going to be talking about establishing and setting boundaries during the holidays. While family celebrations are traditionally cheerful occasions filled with love and laughter, for many of us, spending time with family can be a grab bag of emotions. You may feel love and familiarity, but there's also decades-long dynamics between you and your family members that may not be the most healthy. Your family may treat you like the person they remember, and you may revert to that role when you're around your family without even realizing it. And today, our guest today is Safia Lyon of Prairie Health and Wellness. She is our resident medical expert and a nurse practitioner. She has been so incredible with us, being vulnerable and sharing her own experience with her family and her family history. We thought it would be great to come on and just for us to have a casual talk about our experiences with family during the holidays and how we now establish boundaries. Welcome, Safia.
Well, thank you for having me again. It's a pleasure to be here.
So are you going to be traveling, or what are any holiday plans that you're excited about?
We typically stay in town, with my mom having had a series of hip surgeries. She's just not quite as mobile as she once was. So we'll end up having Thanksgiving at her house, and we all just kind of chip in to co-cook in her home and set it up so that we usually have anywhere from, I'd say, 15 to 20 guests during holidays.
Yeah. How about you, Cal? What do you do during this Thanksgiving?
So for Thanksgiving and Christmas, my husband's family has a rotating calendar that is scheduled like a decade out. Every 10 years, if you're on the Thanksgiving hook or the hosting Christmas hook. It's a pretty structured thing. My husband's family lives in the Chicagoland area, so I'm not always with my immediate family. So depending on what that schedule is, sometimes will dictate where we go for the holidays. My husband's also an only child, so we usually try to spend time with his family because my parents have Jess as a backup plan. Thanks for being a backup, Jess. We're hosting Christmas this year, which is going to be quite a big, actually easier undertaking. But so that being said, Thanksgiving will go over to one of Brian's aunts or uncles or cousins' house.
And when you host, how many people?
15 to 20.
Okay. All right. I like to take every day by day and live in the present. So I don't yet have Thanksgiving plans. I don't know if any of you all recognize our family's inability to make plans. I don't know if your mother is like that at all, but I know being here, we have all of our Aunt Gail here, and then, my mom and parents here. And so trying to really hammer out details with, they talk a lot. Our family talks a lot. I'm not sure how much communication is happening. So,
Sure.
So we'll kind of see what Aunt Gail has going on as well, and then see whether we're going to hop on that train. I know with COVID and Uncle Danny having been sick with a compromised immune system, we have been kind of playing each thing by ear, depending on what's happening with COVID and,
in fact,
cold and flu season.
Thanksgiving last year, because Brian got COVID. So we had a charcuterie board that fed 20 people that I had ordered that we ate over the break. And then I had to make a last minute run to the grocery store to get all the Thanksgiving things to make Thanksgiving dinner for the family, which worked out great. It was fine. It is what it is. But I think, to your point, Jess, I think what many of us have learned is it's like, the best made plans, right? So you try to make plans, but then at the end of the day, you really don't know how it's going to pan out in the end.
Yeah. And we had, I think sometimes last year we had all of our dad's family here, and then we hosted. Sometimes I get really anxious. I don't know if you guys ever get this way, and then it ends up being better than you thought. But was so nervous and horrified about things that would be said to me that would be really offensive, or not knowing, I think we're in such a polarized political climate
Yeah.
that if people are just going to start saying crazy things to me, I think I was getting so nervous about it. And I'm not going to be combative about it. But it's something that I will have to take some time to ground myself, self-soothe, think of responses. Is that an opportunity for me to remove myself from that situation at that time? And actually, it ended up being a wonderful time, and that was all kind of in my head. But I don't know if that happens with you guys when you're setting your expectations and how that ends up playing out.
Yeah, I think I've learned. So when we talk about having healthy expectations, obviously disappointment comes from unmet expectations. So growing up with such a diverse family, I have learned how to adjust my expectations. And so some of that just comes on shifting my focus to the things that are within my control. So becoming super obsessed about how the table setting is going to look and what time are we putting in, which side, or, how coordinating an oven schedule so that I know exactly when things are coming in and out of the oven. So my sisters are like, we can't even come into your kitchen when you're in there because it's like it's like throwing a wrench, inside of a cogwheel or something. So I just pretty much busy myself in the kitchen with the things I can control as almost an avoidance strategy so that everyone else has to be out of the kitchen and talking and hopefully communicating while I'm cooking.
Well, I think about that. That's such a boundary. Like, to me, right, a boundary is an invisible line that separates, right, me from you. It separates your physical space, your feelings, needs, and responsibilities. And so your boundaries tell other people how they can treat you and what's acceptable. I've definitely done that a lot more. It's not necessarily removing yourself from a situation before it happens, but having a safe place for you to be. So I've even had it where I'm upstairs. I'll talk with my spouse ahead of time. So I'm going to be upstairs doing these certain things because that's my way of like being out of the chaos for a little bit. And so like for you, that's your kitchen. Mm-hmm. So like identifying a safe space if possible. Right. And that maybe that is avoiding, but I think there are a lot of strategies and things that we can do because the point is to keep us healthy and safe. It's not to resolve issues or make everybody else feel wonderful. Is how do we keep ourselves feeling safe and healthy, right?
Yeah, I think even just daily cooking, my kids know that the kitchen is a complaint-free zone. Like you can't complain in the kitchen. So if they come in and there's something heavy on their minds, I'm like, ooh, this sounds like it's a complaint. And then they just back right out of the kitchen. We've created that safe space for cooking. When we sit down at the dining room table, we can talk through some of those feelings and especially if there are some we do peek and pet, so if there's some complaints associated with your pets, that's okay, but not in the kitchen, not while I'm preparing our food.
Yeah, I think we talked about that, but we saw you, oh my gosh, 2019 when you did peek and pet, and that, or no, it was around Christmas time, I don't know, whenever it was, if it was 2018, because you guys did it at your dinner table one night. I think it was when we went to
like at the.
It was for Aunt Mandy's funeral.
Yeah. Oh, Mandy's funeral.
Yeah, I think that would have been 2019.
Oh, but I didn't have the kids with me, did I? Anyway, it's a long time ago. Gio would have been 4, and he says peek and pet every night at our dinner table.
Oh, that's
like
wonderful.
It left such an impression on him, and he doesn't want anything other than peek and pet. You can't say let's all talk about our day, or let's talk about scale of 1 to 10. Those are not acceptable. It has to be your peek and pet. And that was from you guys, which I think is great. And I've recommended to clients. I think that's great.
Yeah. My sister, Angie, recently heard attitude and gratitude.
Yeah.
That's how one of her friends did it. What's something that gave you a little bit of attitude, and then what's something that you were grateful for. Yeah.
I like that. How about you, Kel? What are some strategies maybe you've implemented, or some crazy things that someone has said to you that's then had you reformulating for next time?
I think for me, it's a little different just because it's so much lower key. I spend my holidays for the most part with Brian's family, and they all everything is very scheduled and controlled to eliminate any volatility, any drama. So there's no drama during the holidays, at least on the surface. And so it makes for a very pleasant interaction, which is really why I like it too. It's very predictable. in a lot of ways. In fact, it can be so much so that sometimes what we've tried to do when we host is add like some sort of a fun component to it. I think increasingly with most families, there is just everyone is tense. Maybe not even toward each other, but just in general, there's just tension with what's going on in the world, stress and anxiety of things. So, I think one of the things that we will do when we host Christmas in particular is have some sort of a tension breaker. So, a couple years ago, we brought like 6 pack of, I don't know, so I think Izzy used to make some like Thanksgiving flavored sodas. And so then everybody would try that or just some fun little components. So when you're spending time with family, it's a fun distraction that everyone finds enjoyable that doesn't have to be about the family dynamic of some sort, right? So it kind of helps everybody forget about all that and it becomes a lot more enjoyable.
And I think that's different, interesting because your husband's an only child. And so he might not have, right? He's not going to have any sibling issues or tension or be triggered that way. And then also by spending it with your in-laws, you don't have that those emotional triggers for yourself, right? Because it's
Exactly.
not your
So it
family.
makes it
I mean, it is your
for,
family, but
in some
family
ways,
of origin.
I've removed myself from my triggers in that way. I've moved far away from my family. When I talk about holidays with family, it's with, because not only is Brian an only child, but a couple of his cousins are as well. So, or there's only one child that's there. So when we spend holidays, it's with 3 or 4 aunts and uncles, their kids, and then everyone's married at this point, and then they have a couple kids. And so that's like the unit that shows up, which is very similar to, our families that we grew up with, right? Where you're spending holidays with your aunts and uncles and cousins. It's the same thing. It's just not my family. So it's people I like, and I don't know them well enough to not like them anymore.
Yeah. Well, I mean, have you ever, maybe I'm wrong, but like any of us gathering, like, with people talking of controversial topics, and then what do? Or people say things that we really disagree with. What are your guys' strategies and tips to handle when people are saying things that maybe are offensive to you or upsetting?
I think maybe having a proactive approach. So if you know that certain family members are more likely to visit those topics, even just saying, hey, we're trying to keep this lighthearted. We're not going to talk politics. We're not going to talk, religion. We're not going to talk, maybe having some off limit topics. But one of the things that we do, like our mom is kind of known for storytelling. She captures the audience. She's very animated. She gets really loud. So I will, and it doesn't matter what other people are talking about. When it's her turn to talk, she expects the full attention of the room. So if I can get her to share a story that I know is going to be, oh gosh, remember that time, Mom, when, Grandpa came home and he did something crazy and everybody went out and and she gets so excited to start telling them. Before you know it, everybody's engaging in like a happy memory of our family. And especially for the family members who aren't with us, which I think is kind of what holidays really should be about, the family that we still have presently, and then remembering our family, that are not with us anymore. So just kind of queuing her up. So I usually have a pocket full of those stories, like, oh, Mom, let's tell so-and-so about that time, Grandpa did this, or, the time that Uncle Tom wore a hat at the breakfast table, like.
That's more triggering. That would be triggering for us, maybe.
I think that goes in line a little bit with what you're saying, Kelly, with the game, right? They have something in your back pocket, like you were kind of saying, right? Like it's topics, like and then also, we have this game.
The air,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the other part too is when you're hosting large crowds. The last couple of years, it seems like the holidays have had decent weather, so there's like the kids can go outside. They're not running around the house. It's like all the things that maybe drive everybody crazy. That helps too. Is seems like everywhere we go, I felt like that way growing up too. I don't know about you guys. When we went back to like Victoria for New Year's, we're like for most of the part, everywhere we go, there would be like a kids area of some sort. Sometimes it was lamer than others. Sometimes it would be like really cool old school toys or something that people had. But I think from a family perspective, for me, because I'm a people pleaser, it's like trying to not create stress for others. So like making sure the kids have things to do, that they're not driving everybody crazy.
I know I have a talent for bringing everything to the fore agreement. So what helps me anytime I'm going to be with people who might be saying things that are hurtful, offensive to me, I just kind of tell myself the second agreement, don't take things personally, and that's about them and not me. I know we had some family over, I believe last Christmas, and our cousins were saying something about Rush Limbaugh's death and our father engaged, and they all were like yelling. And I felt like the engaging in politics was something that all of those people were very comfortable doing. And that would be a topic I would avoid, right? That would be something that I would avoid. And so just being able to tell myself, like, this is their stuff. This is what they're engaging in. They're all comfortable raising their voices and fighting it. And that's not about me. I don't need to hop in. I don't need to soothe the situation. I feel oftentimes my role would be to like lighten the mood and get in the way and soothe everybody else's emotions, but to kind of be like, oh, they're arguing, right? That's outside of me. That's them doing that. And so at that time, I got up and went somewhere else and busied myself with something else, because that wasn't anything. I think just recognizing that wasn't mine to take on, you know?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think it's hard not to take things personally, or at least bring them into you. But it seems like also knowing who's coming to your party, knowing who's coming to your house, and knowing those personalities, and you kind of know what are the possible, like we've known our families for so long at this point. You know, there are things that you can, like, theoretically, right? You know that could come up in hindsight, you know, if you wanted to prevent that in the future. There are some people that might be family members who are more reasonable about keeping it in check versus others who just get really emotional, and you know that, and trying to figure out how to manage that. I don't know, but because I'm just all about like trying to keep everybody happy and on an even keel for the handful of hours everybody is together.
But I think like what's helped me so much, I know I talked about this before, but just understanding that I'm an empath, if this makes sense, it's kind of like, okay, you can do all the things both of you guys are saying, set up spaces, try to make everything set up, have topics to talk about, have a safe space for you. But if it all blows up, that's not your responsibility. Do you understand? Like that's those people. And what's so funny is like, so our cousin Shiloh and Ian's partner, Jen, were disagreeing with dad. They know dad. They know how dad is. They weren't offended. They'll talk later. You know what I mean? It's not like they're,
well, they don't have that history, so like we would have or something.
Well, right. But but like, I would say, you know, everyone understands the dynamic of our family and their own family. And I don't need to rush in, if this makes sense, and defend them or protect them, or defend our father and protect our father. Like, they're all adults and they're going to make those choices to engage in those conversations. I don't need to be responsible for the emotions of the room. I don't need, even though it's in my home, they're choosing to engage in all of that stuff. And so I'm letting it go, right? You do your due diligence, you try, but if all hell breaks loose, you don't have to jump in and save everybody, right? You don't have to do that. You just have to make sure you're safe. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, I guess even to bubble it up higher is, as much as one tries to set boundaries and create boundaries, there are some things that just happen.
Yeah, I would prefer now. I would say even 3 years ago, I would jump in, right, and try to simmer it down. But now I'm just like, wow, look at all of those crazy people. I'm going to go outside now. Bye. You know what I mean? And like, that's my boundary, that I'm not going to do that anymore. And I know, Safia, you've talked before, and I know you really like Richard Swartz and his work on internal family systems. And so kind of also looking at it that way, and how do you kind of go about it that way, looking at you know, from a systems perspective?
Yeah. So usually, so when we talk about the internal family systems, the parts that usually come up when we're talking about some of these family dynamics that are maybe a little bit harder to navigate through, I would say exiles and managers. So exiles are the parts of us that when we were younger, or maybe 7 or 14, or something happened that we didn't manage as well as we could. Maybe we just weren't empowered with the skills to manage it. So it was traumatic. And our managers are the parts of us that are there to protect those exiles, right? So this is like your inner critic who may set some boundaries, don't even engage, because if you do that, it's going to end, bad, in setting some boundaries to keep you protected. Your angry protector, workaholic, so for me, I'm going to just be super busy in the kitchen. That's a protector part, and I can recognize that. So when we start to think about the way that our family members are, I try to see what part of them may be involved in that particular event, and coming at it from a place of curiosity. So, we talk about the parts of us, but those parts are not our core self. So our core self can be curious and compassionate. So we can come at it differently. One of the things I heard is that, I've never met a part that didn't like to be recognized. So when somebody is maybe being that angry protector, saying, wow, I can see how passionate you are about this. It sounds like it's really important to you. So even just bringing in awareness to the way that they're reacting can help to maybe take that part, okay, I'm being recognized. Maybe I can downshift or de-escalate the situation. So parts work has been really helpful for me because I can recognize what parts I'm interacting with, especially with my siblings and with my mom. So when I can see the part and then know how to communicate with that part, which is not the same like I would communicate when they're in core self. So parts work is really helpful for those family events.
And I think step one of that, I would say, would be self-soothing, right? So if we have to, we might have a visceral reaction to someone's anger. And so to ensure that we've taken a moment to calm ourselves, soothe ourselves, and then we can, ask those questions like you're saying, exactly, you seem really passionate about this topic, and making, being a scientist, right? And making observations and looking at it from a perspective outside of yourself. So you're not in it, which I think so many times with our family of origin, it's like we're a cog in the wheel. It's like we walk through that threshold, we automatically just start playing our part, whether we're aware of it or not. And so being able to be very present and grounded, trying not to react, but explore it, in a curious way. Yeah, I think that's excellent. I think that's really good. I need to do more reading and exploring on that.
So just some questions on that too is is it just kind of training then, right? How to know, it's like recognizing each family member is different. Each family member has a different set of types, right? Or different size of them. Is this also partly maybe even going through an exercise to kind of understand your family members or things like that, to ways, I guess my question is how do you train your brain to be in those, when you're in those moments, how to react?
Yeah, I think that's great. So when we talk about past trauma, trying to correlate how it feels physiologically in our own bodies. So when we talk about triggers, that could be triggering, what happens physiologically? And so one of the things that we learned is our resiliency zone, right? So you've got this resiliency zone. And if you get out of your resiliency zone and you end up, this is where we're anxious, worrisome, maybe even rapid heart rate, you can feel your heart pounding, blood pressure maybe goes up. Or if we fall down out of our resiliency zone, this is maybe where we're a little withdrawn, we're disassociating, so this would be more just maybe even some depression, lack of empathy. We just really emotionally remove ourselves. So when you so my work with a therapist and parts work was recognizing when I'm in my resiliency zone and when I'm getting close to the edges of that zone. Okay. And as you can start to feel your body, like we talked about kind of our body being able to give us cues when a food or something in the environment isn't agreeing to us. But even with our environment, those cues come on and they come on pretty subtle. whether it's
Okay.
something in our stomach or we feel our heart rate going up. For me, it's like a void in my chest, and I start to feel that. And I can even put my hand on my chest, like telling myself, okay, I feel that. And then I start to get curious. Okay, why is this happening? Why do I feel that void again? Why is my heart rate going up? Is this something present? Is this something past? Is there a part of me, like one of my parts, that is is being called from that physiological response? I have a necklace. You'll find me kind of playing with my necklace. That's like, okay, I'm getting close to the edge of my resiliency zone. And instead of fully losing myself in that emotion, I pause and I try to get curious. Where does this come from? And the more I can stay grounded and in a place of core self with my curiosity, the less reactive I'm going to become. So it allows me to hold my own without being sucked into the vortex of drama that is created by those family members.
And so what I'm hearing you say, right, is that work of knowing your triggers.
Yes.
There is an incredible book. I don't know if you got it. It's relatively new. It's an audiobook. What Happened to You?
I'm
Oprah
familiar.
Winfrey
I have not.
Dr.
It's
Bruce
on my
Perry.
list. Mm-hmm.
So good. I think they do such a great job of explaining triggers and how they're so subtle that we may not know that's happening. And I like to think of it too. Another way of looking at it is fight, flight, or freeze. I am definitely a fighter. My husband is a freezer. And that was like, to me, just in our dynamic, if he would freeze, I was like, what is happening? You know what I mean? Like he didn't care. He's not responding. What's happening? But to understand like, oh, right. When he's triggered, right, and your adrenaline is pumping, he freezes. And so I can know for me that wanting to like jump up and fight and like, recognize what that looks like. I know, Kelly and I, you and I have both talked hearing yelling. Right. Hearing yelling is very triggering for us. I remember living in Philadelphia, and there was in a car, there was a man yelling at a woman, and I like ran up to my apartment and started crying. You know what I mean? It was like, what was that about? I was so sensitive to like everyone else's stuff, right? Just so raw out there, and absorbing that and taking that on and being like, well, what's that about? Right. And so doing that work of knowing yourself, right? We have to know ourselves and know, wait, this is different for me. What does that feel like for me? What does that look like for me? And then we have to self-soothe. And I love the idea, I talk about this so much in my work, is prevention and intervention, right? So there's that prevention piece that, if we think of scale of 1 to 10, 10, I'm triggered, like my adrenaline's pumping, I'm not engaged in my rational mind. If we're caring for ourselves in prevention, we can be around the world at like a 0 to 3. And so if something comes that triggers us, maybe we'll get to a 5 or a 6, but we can kind of manage it. But if we're not doing the prevention piece and we're walking around the world at a 7, it's not going to take much for us to tip over. And so it's like making sure that we're doing all the things that we talk so much about at Chasing Brighter, is caring for yourself, finding your joy, getting enough sleep. How was your health, your physical health, your mental health? And then the intervention piece, which I think is so much that we're talking about today, right? Which is when it goes down, when stuff goes down, what are the strategies we need to do right then and there to make sure that we're keeping ourselves safe and then can get in a spot to where we can self-soothe.
It's really interesting, Jess. Is a lot of that in that book? Because, I have it.
In that book, for sure. The self-soothing component is definitely in there. You can be triggered and elevated and heightened indefinitely. And that is where it comes in, where they're linking, right, trauma to health issues, right? Because when you're heightened at that state, right, high blood pressure, heart disease, reduced immunity, all of those things. And we're not aware, people are not aware that they're walking around heightened. And
Safia, I love that you're talking about the resilience zone too. That sounds really cool.
And that's in your internal family systems. Is that?
It is. It is. And then I also wanted to bring up, just with family gatherings, and since we kind of started this with setting some healthy boundaries, just with fight and flight, Pete Walker also adds in fawning. and how so many of us learn to fawn, which is take care of everyone else around us. And when we learn it at an early age, you do something bad, you get scolded, there's that lack of connection and security. And then you do something good and they're like, oh my gosh, you did something good. This is amazing. And so kids will naturally start to try to do good things for other people. It's rewarding. And I feel like that recognizing that that could be a coping skill can also help you find those triggers, because I feel like the alarm sounds pretty quick when we're in fight or flight, like, oh, something's happening. But with that fawning, like where we're so engaged in taking care of everyone else, like when you kept saying, that's not mine, I don't need to be a part of those. Those are adults engaging in a conversation that they're comfortable with. But our desire to want to take care of that and make sure that everybody is calm and at peace and connected. So that fawning aspect, when I learned about fawning, that is when the light went off for me. Like, oh, I may not be in fight or flight, but that fawning is still such a silent alarm that I need to recognize I'm still being triggered, and needing to have a better awareness of what in the environment is doing that, so that I can start to widen my resiliency zone.
And I think what was helpful for me with the fawning as well was that engaging in it made my husband uncomfortable, right? We've been married 21 years and he did not grow up in such an emotionally volatile environment. And so when I would jump in and what I thought I was doing was to help everybody and bring everybody down, he felt like it was throwing myself in the mix and then possibly escalating, but also making him feel uncomfortable. So he was kind of like, let's not jump in, right? Let's not jump in. But it took me, I think, years and years and years and years to develop better skills for that, and to be able to, it is not intrinsic for me to care for myself. So that is a very hard work for me to touch base with me before ensuring everybody else is okay. So that I think that's hard work.
Yes, I know you have a hard time with that, Jess. Have you touched base with yourself today?
Can I tell you, I wanted to do a reel yesterday showing an eye twitch, because if one more thing was put on my plate yesterday, I mean, I don't know, ladies, come on. Do you have these moments where like, oh, your week is just every hour is planned and more is thrown on, and like, I was at my limit yesterday and then 3 more things were thrown on, just of having the children and their activities that I was. And so my car, they keep telling me every day is going to be done. And so yesterday was the day where they called to say, sorry, not today. Today's not the day with the car. With your car's not going to be done. It's like, I was over the edge. And I was like, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do to care for myself? Because it was so stressful. So I was trying to identify my needs. Justin made dinner. I did have to I wanted Giovanni to skip baseball practice really badly. I wanted to stay home, but instead all of the parents go out and watch their children. And I just let my 7-year-old run to practice, and I sat in the car and watched a movie. So I was like, hopefully he made it to the right field. I'm going to stay in the car. He
came back, right? He's not missing. So,
well, I had Gabby come with me, and I love when she comes with me because she's my get out of the car goer, and so I'm like, go see if he's done. Go see, it's getting dark. They didn't have lights in the field. And so I was like, go check him out. And then replanning for today, right? Okay. Is there any time tomorrow that I can use for self-care? Anytime I can squeeze it in? And what are some things, if anything, can we take off our plate? Like really strategizing. Can I outsource anything or take anything off my plate? The answer is no for this week, unfortunately. So it's just, I think to me, the core 3 are moving my body, eating well, and sleeping. So I can just really tighten those 3 up. And I was in bed, I think a little before 9 last night. And then just trying to nourish myself and carve out opportunities for physical activity. How about you two?
Well, I was going to say that, what you're talking about too, talking about the holidays and boundaries. I mean, it gets so busy during the holidays. Similarly, it gets really hard for, maybe it's like the typical self-care isn't it. You have to kind of maybe adjust what you're doing. So indulging during the holiday season, right? And less movement. But maybe that's okay too. Maybe some of what we have to do for self-care needs to evolve given certain times and what's going on. That video watching was self-care, Jess, right? I mean, It wasn't what you wanted to do, but I mean, it wasn't what you typically do, but it was something that is serving its purpose in that way.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a binge watcher or a TV person. And I would say, I would debate whether that is a coping skill, right? Watching shows. But I guess that was an opportunity for me to dissociate a little bit. And I needed that.
Well, and even just, some other things like maybe going for a walk instead of sitting and watching the game, or little videos for deep breathing exercises, Qigong, legs up the wall. I feel like sometimes with self-care, we feel like it has to be this extravagant plan, like I'm going to go get a massage, or I'm going to take a hot bubble bath and soak. But even just, the kids will find me on the dining room floor with my legs up the wall, just laying there and breathing. Like, why are you on the floor in the dining room? It's like a common to find me somewhere on the ground, just laying and breathing, and just taking, even if it's just 3 or 5 minutes just to breathe. It can be just enough of a reset that you can make it through the rest of the day.
If we were summarizing what we were talking about today, it would be kind of that prevention piece, the self-care piece. I think before going to your family holiday event, you would be looking at kind of preparing, are there going to be any triggers, and what can I do if I'm triggered? What can I kind of set up for myself to make sure that it's okay? And then I have those intervention pieces going, and there might be some personal work we have to do before, during, and after the holidays, whether that is working with a therapist, whether that is working with the healer of some sort. We're always talking about book, right? Listening to the books that we've been recommending throughout this podcast, so we can kind of understand the dynamics that are at play here.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, Safia, thank you so much for joining us. It's always great talking to you.
It's a pleasure to be on.
We always get amazing nuggets of insights, so thank you.
Well, thank you. Absolutely. And hopefully we're all ready for some happy holidays.
Yeah,
better equipped to go in with our hearts open and our eyes wide open.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks for listening and joining us today.
And don't forget to follow us on social media at Chasing Brighter, or on our blog, chasingbrighter.com.